Good afternoon. Welcome to ETAuto live panel discussion. Today we have a very interesting topic on the PLI scheme, a production linked scheme that the government of India is planning for automotive sector. And the discussion topic for today is what to expect from the production linked incentive scheme for auto sector. The automotive sector is one of the biggest employer of the country. They employ over 30 million people directly or indirectly if you talk about entire automotive value chain. If you talk about auto component manufacturer, who are probably one of the biggest contributor to the GDP. They contribute about 2.3% to the GDP, and overall automotive sector contributes about over 7% to the GDP, and GST collection also to the tune of over 15-17%. So this is a very pertinent industry. We all know in terms of employment, in terms of tax collection, in terms of the the kind of exports we do. Looking at the sector, what we learned so far, what we have heard from the various sources, what are the criteria, or what are the benefits that the PLI scheme for automotive sector is going to provide. Based on that, we are going to have a discussion and find out what will the scheme be primarily. Will it be export oriented? Will it significantly support the domestic market growth? Will the beneficiary will be limited to the big players, or is it going to be covering the vast majority of the manufacturers? Will there be any minimum value addition criterion? Will it entail change in the supply chain for OEMs and OEs? So these are some of the questions that we are going to explore in this panel discussion. But before we get into the panel discussion, I have here with me my friend from Ernst & Young, one of the leading research firm, Saurabh Agarwal. He will give a sneak peek into the policy PLI scheme that the government is planning so far. All this is based on the reports and the sources that suggest. Saurabh, I would like to invite you to give a brief presentation on the subject. Then we will go into the discussion with the industry honchos who are here to discuss the subject. Over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you, Nabil. When we talk about production-linked incentive scheme, the entire intent of the government to come up with these schemes has been to encourage domestic manufacture, promote exports from India, and ensure that there is a import substitution. Specifically, if I have to say, the intent is to make Bharat Atmanirbhar. If we look into the overall matrix in the way the schemes have come out for other sectors, primarily the government has looked into the investment criteria, how much investments you will be making, what is your current turnover, and overall, what is your growth for the future. They have been choosing the applicants based on three-stage process, which is filing of application, appraisal by a project management agency, and thereafter disbursal of applications. As of now, 3 schemes have been notified, and the schemes are to be notified for 10 sectors, including auto and auto component. If we talk about the current way, the schemes have emerged for other sectors, when we talk about electronics, specifically mobile and mobile components, the budget allocation was 40,951 crores. And there was an investment criteria specifically for a domestic company and a foreign company. Important to note, they created a difference between a domestic company and a foreign company, wherein for a domestic company, they were required to invest 200 crores in 5 years, whereas a foreign company was required to invest 1,000 crore in 5 years. Even on the turnover side, the baseline turnover for eligibility under the scheme for a foreign company was 10,000 crore, vis-a-vis for a domestic company was merely 100 crore. Similarly, if we talk about medical devices as well, the investment criteria was 180 crores. And when we talk about the pharma API, there was no investment criteria. While the scheme earlier came with an investment threshold, but based on the representations made by the industry and the industry association, the government removed the investment threshold criteria and made it primarily linked to production. If we see in all these schemes which have come so far, incentive has been given to incremental sales, and whether it is an incremental domestic sale or it's an incremental export sale, the incentive has been given to both such type of sale. More so because government believe that this will lead to import substitution and overall making Bharat self-reliant or Atmanirbhar. When we talk about the auto and auto component scheme, specifically the scheme has not been out in the market yet. It has to be released by the government based on whatever is the information as per the media sources as released by ETAuto. What we have found is that primarily the intent of the scheme appears to be more focused on the bigger guys, wherein there is a quite a strict criteria in order to promote the big players to invest more into India and make India as an export hub. The budget allocation for this scheme has been 57,002 crores for auto and auto component. And if we talk about EV, there is a specific scheme for advanced chemistry cell where the budget allocation has been around 18,100 crores. The eligibility criteria for a vehicle manufacturer has been a global revenue of 10,000 crore with a global investment in fixed assets of 3,500 crores and a revenue from outside India of 1,000 crore. When we talk about a component manufacturer, the global revenue of more than 1,000 crore, global investment in fixed assets of 350 crores, and a revenue outside India of 200 crores. Primarily, we are talking about four types of schemes: a vehicle champion scheme, production linked incentive scheme, global sourcing scheme, and component champion scheme. There is an additional criteria requirement for a year-on-year growth of 8%. Incentives appears to be linked to the sales value, with a cashback being available to the companies who are selected for the same. But if we nutshell, if we have to say, primarily the focus is to create biggies, more big, and ensure that the more investment comes into India. That appears to be the focus of this scheme. I think that's all from my end, but what is important for the industry to look at is from a procurement standpoint, you need to look into your procurement chain, how you'll be achieving a local value added content criteria. If at all there is something in the scheme, we are hearing somewhere around 70 to 80% of local value added content being an essential requirement to go for this scheme. How you are thinking of ramping up your manufacturing in order to boost exports. And then, of course, from the sales and marketing perspective, how you are planning to have your strategies around sales and marketing to boost your export sales. And then, of course, it comes on the finance side as to how you'll be preparing your detailed project report, how you'll be filing your applications, and how you'll be funding the requirement for additional capacity, if at all required, to do exports from India. That's all from my end. Back to you, Naveen.
Thank you so much, for such a quick, view of what to expect from the policy. Let me tell everybody that this is only a policy draft, and we have sourced from the media and other sources. So far, these information are available. We also did an article on the same. So, looking at the presentation that you just made, we see a lot of auto component manufacturer will be out of the benefit that could probably come along with this scheme. And rightly so, we have called top leaders from the auto component side. We have Mr. Deepak Jain, who is president of Auto Component Manufacturers Association. Thank you so much, Deepak, for joining in. We also have Mr. Nirmal Kumar Minda, chairman and managing director, Uno Minda Group, India's one of the largest auto component manufacturer. We also have Mr. Sunil Arora, managing director, Abilities India Pistons and Rings. He is former chairman of MSME group at ACMA, and he represents ACMA here today. ACMA MSME, especially those who seems to have been left out in this PLI scheme. We also have Mr. Sohinder Gill, Director General SMEV, which is a body of electric vehicle manufacturer. Mr. Gill is going to represent electric vehicle manufacturer. They also seems to be not at the center of advantage if you talk about the large number of companies. They operate at a very small revenue level. Looking at the criteria, most of them will be out of it. So let's start the discussion by bringing you in, Deepak ji, and I want to understand, how do you justify the criteria that has been just mentioned? I think about 85-90% of the component manufacturer may not be able to meet those criteria of revenue of about 1,000 crore and the investment and all that that is being laid out in the policy. How do you see that?
Maybe first and foremost, thank you always for giving the opportunity to ACMA to voice uh, over your platform. First and foremost, let me do some context setting. First, I think the PLI is a scheme which is, as Saurabh mentioned, to promote competitiveness and also to promote Atmanirbharta. I think that's been basically the prime objective. And of course, the component industry, which actually peaked in the 2018-2019, which was almost about $57 billion, have actually seen a sharp decline. 1920, we declined 12%. And also now going forward, H1, we have already declined 34%. So this kind of interventions of making any industry competitive and also to promote Atmanirbharta is always a welcome move. Now, as you've also said, that we, of course, have been in discussions, but these discussions were primarily done during the COVID time in June, July. We had some industry-wide discussions, both ACMA as well as SIAM were called for deliberations with the concerned authorities. And here we had actually given our views, but before giving the views, there were certain boundary conditions which basically were laid by the authorities, stating that this kind of production linked incentive should be probably given to certain champions which have the scale, which have the capability of investing in the future so that they can actually take a very, very significant portion in the whole global value chain. As you rightly know, that the global value chain of components coming out of India is still very, very minuscule, less than 1.5%. And I think with that, we had actually had certain deliberations. Of course, we are also very eagerly anticipating this whole shape. We still don't have what the scheme would be, how it would be. But of course, going by Saurabh's presentation, ACMA's fabric is largely 70% is MSME based on the new definition, which was also rolled out recently. And of course, if you look at just the 1,000 crore threshold, you probably would have around about 35 to 40, or probably you could say around about 10% or so of its, or 5 to 7% of the members would basically be reaching that threshold. If you actually include the export revenue or the global revenue, that actually risked would further shrink. But I'm just doing some context setting given the boundaries what we had during the discussions by the government of India. But I think we welcome this intent of Atmanirbharta and making the industry most competitive. One more thing I would like to say. I think one more intent and context was that irrespective, whoever grows and captures the growth, because there would be only few on that scale and capability aspect, the MSMEs would also be included in this growth. Because what COVID has taught us is that we as an auto ancillary industry is very, very intertwined. We actually are so interdependent that even one supplier goes down, the whole value chain stops. So here, I think the intent for the authorities was that even if we are able to make champions of the companies who have the scale and the investment to kind of fast track, they would be able to source across the spectrum, making basically value add for everyone. So I'll pause at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepak ji, for this initial remark. I'll come to you, Sunil ji. Now the ball is in your court. Deepak ji says that the champions, it was more likely to award and reward the champions, and champions being defined by way of revenue, by way of investment. How do you justify this?
Thank you for this opportunity, Nabil. And Deepak absolutely rightly said that this is a once in a lifetime kind of a scheme that the government is coming out for the auto industry, and specifically for the auto component industry as well. And we have to all work together, whether it's the large players or the MSMEs. But we like to. There are certain things that must be put in context, and that is the MSME players are largely export-driven players. So if you'll see a 50 crore or a 100 crore company which is doing maybe 30, 40, 50% of its turnover in exports. So, so that is one part. I mean, that as we see even in exhibitions that we do here in India or we do overseas, we see that majority of the MSMEs tend to participate because they're always hungry for overseas business. That is, of course, the context, and that we all know is happening. But we have to also see the government's intent, and that they want to create large champions, and they want to further that. There again, we have to see whether we have a lot of joint ventures here in this country, where will that only be, and they are exporting back to their parent companies. So we all know a lot of companies do that. Will it only benefit them? Will they only go back and supply to their parent companies? Maybe that is the intent of the government to to increase the share of exports. But I think, as you rightly said, that we need to work on this together. We need to create a kind of industry cohesion, industry format within ACMA, so that we can all work together in furthering the cause of this PLI scheme, wherein the MSMEs get together with the large players, and there is some sort of a scheme created, so that like we had the defense offset scheme, so something like that. It's not mandatory, but we should work out some policy within ACMA to make it more inclusive, so that the deliverables of the government are achieved within the set time frame.
Deepak ji, one interesting thing we note in Indian component space that the smaller players have larger percentage of exports revenue coming up. People like Sunil ji or other companies have been exporting a lot. Even some companies export to China also. In such a scenario, keeping them away from this scheme, is it going to help the cause?
So, Nabil, I think, as I said, and I completely agree with Sunil ji, that we need to make a more comprehensive view. And as I said, that deliberations which happened were probably in the month of July. And a lot has changed since then. I mean, say we have seen a very fast recovery of the domestic industry itself. I think the key point for the industry is how, and also probably for the government, is how do we get the growth back? And growth back could be irrespective of the market. It could be domestic, it could be exports. And the whole idea of actually making an industry competitive is basically to get scale. The intent is, if we were 57 billion and we've actually shrunk almost, I would say in 2 years, about 30 to 40%, how do we go back to the peak? Because as we get scale, we'll get more competitive, be it aftermarket, be it export, or be it domestic. And it's an interesting observation. I was just seeing Saurabh's slide where he actually had seen I believe it was the mobile industry, where what they have done is they've actually given it on incremental sales, irrespective of basically where you are getting the growth from. And of course, I think one pertinent point is that we should also see that the scheme is used in the right intent, where, of course, there is domestic capital and there is foreign capital, both in this very, very competitive industry. And again, I'm taking a clue from what Mr. Saurabh had presented. Maybe it's a good time for the auto industry and the component industry to reflect that should we use the domestic capital and the foreign capital in basically a different lens, so that we are able to have the best advantage, which basically both entities of domestic and foreign can get. Intent again being very clear: make in India, localize in India, and also manufacture more value addition in India.
Thank you, Deepak ji. I'll come to you, Nirmal ji, and understand from you. Uh, if we see the focus of the government, what just now sort of showed in his presentation is to enhance manufacturing, probably make India manufacturing champion. This is what being discussed. So if you look at enhancing the volume, the cap, the criteria currently being fixed based on the revenue. Do you think it is fair for an industry like India, where most of the component manufacturers are either running on joint ventures? If we talk about the big ones, those who may come uh, under this scheme, or those who can take advantage of this scheme, largely run on joint venture model, and joint venture does not allow them many a time to go and explore the overseas market. In such a scenario, do you think the Indian component manufacturer to take the optimal advantage of this scheme the way it appears right now?
Thank you, Naveen. Thank you very much for today's. I think it is a very good initiative by ETAuto during this time, when we are all not very clear about this PLI scheme, what is this scheme like and how are we going to move and all that. And as Deepak said that, I would start from the beginning, because any scheme the government brings, we as an component sector or as an industry should be part of it. We must be, it must be shared with us. We should have given, normally the government does, but this time I think we were invited sometime in June, and that the image was given that, it is primarily for export, to promote the export. But what I heard from our Saurabh from EY, that it is not only for export, it is to promote Atmanirbhar Bharat also. So this is a very good initiative from the government, and particularly our Honorable Prime Minister, to go in for Atmanirbhar Bharat. As you know that this scheme should be, first of all, you are asking about joint venture and all that. I'll give that answer first, and then I'll come to later part of this, of the bigger player. First of all, we are not very clear whether this scheme is for auto component or auto industries, or who is going to take the more benefit about it. Auto industries, when I'm saying it is OEM. So the scheme itself should be, some kind of ratio should be there, a split should be between the auto component and the auto industry. Secondly, we import about 1 lakh crore rupees worth of component by OEMs and also by component manufacturer. So I think the government objective, as Saurabh mentioned, that to localize, one of the objective could be to save the foreign exchange, or to earn the foreign exchange, save the foreign exchange of import, earn from export. Second is the job, basically the employment creation, because the India, we need employments. And third is an investment. When we make an investment, the overall GDP gets growth, the infrastructure gets growth, and so many other sectors gets growth. So government objectives is always threefold. Again, I'm repeating: investment, job creation, saving of foreign exchange. We as an industry, auto component industry or auto sector, are willing to participate, and this is not a small amount of 57,000 crore. So it's a very big amount, very good boost from the government to the industry to really make the localization. So I think this should be split up in the localization matter. Then it comes to the JV or non-JV company, whether the auto component, who will get the maximum benefit. Yes, export is one of the criteria, but should not be the only criteria. The Atmanirbhar, the import substitution is also to be the main criteria. And as you all know that we need to accelerate our EV. How do we accelerate our EV sector if we do not localize EV parts? So right now, all the EV parts are being imported in the country. We know very well. So this is my, as far as the JV company or a non-JV company, I think this is, we need to play on the merit, and both will get benefit, as per this scheme.
Saurav, I would like you to come in and probably give a perspective. Your presentation clearly defines the criteria and all what the government looks at when they plan to roll out this scheme. In your understanding, do you think that the scheme is going to benefit, as I have been reiterating time and again, that only a few dozen companies, and largely they are going to be joint venture Indian and foreign collaborator company. They have those kind of revenue. Hardly a dozen or two companies can benefit from it. Do you think it is really going to make India Atmanirbhar? when it doesn't talk about design in India, it doesn't talk about R&D. In India, there is no focus in R&D for last few years. We have seen the weighted deduction was also taken away. In such a scenario, can you see that manufacture in India is possible or make in India is possible while we completely ignore the design in India aspect?
So, two, 3 points which I'll answer one by one, Nabil, on the question which you have raised. First, to put it on record, the scheme is not out. Whatever we are hearing or whatever I presented is based on media sources. So we don't know what will be the exact scheme looking like. But whatever is coming based out of the media sources, I think the clear intent of the government is to promote the champions and make big champions. That's what happened in China. That's what happened in Japan. That's what happened in Korea. There are all big players who came into the market. And to your question that how does it benefit others? Once the bigger one will grow, automatically the MSME will also grow. They will. It's a ripple effect which will happen in the economy. So if say there is a tier one component manufacturer, if he has to manufacture, he will have to buy a child part from a tier 2 and a tier 3 manufacturer as well. So end of the day, that revenue will come to the MSME. The profits for MSME will grow. So it's not like that it's only meant for biggies. Let me be very crude. I don't think so. That appears to be the intent. The intent is that someone who has the net worth, someone who can invest more into the growth of the country, someone who can actually work towards making India Atmanirbhar and do R&D as well. To your point, Nabil, to do R&D. Now, can a MSME do R&D or can a larger giant do R&D? So I think that is a question which is open, and more so there are respected panelists from the industry who are there can answer that particular question. So I think the ripple effect of the same will be seen in the economy overall. Everyone in the value chain will gain, from the vehicle manufacturer till the tier 3 component manufacturer. In my view, everyone will grow in that particular perspective. Also, the only thing which I foresee and what I have not been hearing is around the EV. I think that's what Mindaji mentioned. So from the EV standpoint, I think there should be something in the scheme which could have been there from an EV standpoint. Maybe there is another scheme in making from an EV standpoint. I don't know. And maybe there's no one from the government side this time to answer that question. That is, are they thinking around EV? Because they specifically allocated a budget of 18,100 crore. Let's understand 18,100 crore for battery is a big budget which the government has given. So I don't think the intent is not to promote EVs. That's why the budget is there for the battery players. Battery is one of the major part of the EV segment to that extent. I hope I answered your query.
Thank you, Saurabh. So as we talk about EV, let's bring in Surenderji here. Surenderji, we see that the discussion moves to EV. People think that EV has been left out. Do you also feel so? Provided there's a outlay of 18,000 for battery manufacturing, do you think here also only the big ones, chosen few ones, are going to benefit? I'll come to you and explain again, Saurabh. I'll put another question to you, how it is going to make big ones more powerful and small ones more dependent on the big masters. But before that, I would like to hear from Suhenderji and understand how much hope do you have from this scheme when it comes to electric vehicles, especially when we have small players. Over 200 startups have come up in this space. What is going to happen to them? And they have already been hit very badly after the pandemic.
Well, Nabil agreed that the scheme is not for any of the OEMs at present that we have, and the highest turnover we have is only 500, 600 crores. But I'm happy with the scheme from the commonality of batteries being one of the major cost of EVs, right? And second is China really becoming so overpowering in batteries, and from geopolitical compulsions or otherwise cost compulsions. If we want to be self-dependent on batteries, then such like steps like PLI must be taken so that at least on batteries front, which is 40% of the cost of the vehicle, is taken care of. And there is some big guy who gets sort of excited to come to India. Even already there are people like Samsung, Panasonic, and of the world who wanted to come, but they had an arbitrage. I think this will be one of the steps. And most important part is, like, it's not a big figure. For example, I am selling around 60, 70,000 two-wheelers today. And if 100,000 crore batteries have to be consumed, it is just 600,000 batteries actually of 1 kilowatt hour each. It's not a faraway distance type of a figure. I think in 3 to 4 years' time, one can easily have a 2,000 crore worth of a plant turnover of a battery plant. So I strongly believe it's one of the very good measures. And like it is being told by Saurabh, if it comes out in its shape, both 1,000 crores and the assets of 300 crores will be easily met by anybody who wants to invest. It's only a little too soon, perhaps 2 years away or 3 years away for this to fructify. I believe that is a time also to be taken for any battery manufacturer to set up a manufacturing plant and come out with good cells.
Thank you, Suender ji. I'll again come back to you, Deepak ji and Sunil ji, both of you. Uh, if you look at the advantage in this scheme, it is certainly going to help overall manufacturing. It will enhance the manufacturing activity in the country, in the automotive space, no doubt about it. But don't you think it is going to give competitive edge to the bigger players, because the kind of cashback that is being offered, that's the presentation shows. We are not sure when it is rolled out what kind of shape it is, but looking at the current information that we have, it gives a good cashback advantage to the eligible players. But do you think that can be passed on to the smaller ones? Will your partners, will your tier ones, will your companies who are able or comes under this criteria ready to pass on the equivalent advantage to their smaller players, the MSMEs? Look at the MSMEs, their profitability is already lower than the big ones. If you look at the average, your members' profitability or PAT, their PAT is lesser than the big ones, especially. And in other part, if you look at the foreign players, their profitability is better than the local ones, because the local ones still pays a lot of money in royalty and other aspects. So how do you see in this scheme of things, there is a democratic growth, or there is a democratic opportunity for all?
So, Nabil, let me just start with this. First and foremost, you have to understand the intent. And again, I'm saying, because you used a very nice word, democracy. And I think in India, it's sometimes loosely and not very aptly basically played out. First and foremost, let's see. The government has done its job. They said 57,500 crores. If I am not mistaken, on the 10 sectors, we have the largest allocation. And I think it's almost 40% of the total allocation which has been given. Second, I think what Nirmalji made a point was very, very important. I think the industry need to deliberate and maybe some guidance where how it will be distributed between the OEMs and the ancillaries. Because you have to understand that largely the revenue and the value add is coming in from the ancillaries, because we are the ones who are actually supplying in the parts. Indeed, the ancillaries, even if I look at even ACMA's members, there are almost 800 plus members. And of course, the scheme will not be able to be applicable to all the members. But the intent here is not that, it's not economy is finite, that the rich is going to get richer, the poor is going to get poorer. I don't believe in that. I think the intent is that we get this distribution. There are in Indian manufacturing many disabilities, and that makes us uncompetitive. Land, labor, logistic cost. And if we are able to get incentivization for making more in India, and again, repeating, not necessarily just exports, but also focusing on the domestic industry, because scale will give competitiveness. And here, your point of saying that will basically the larger players not able to distribute, let's understand that in the global value chain, it is not tier ones and tier twos who set the price. It is the customer always, the end consumer. And this, I would say, is a very, very competitive industry. Of course, the benefit which you get, I'm hoping that this benefit would be actually used by the players who've been able to qualify to source more competitively and maybe more profitably, and also give the advantage to the customer. The idea is, again, and I'm repeating it for the sake of repetitive, is the intent. If the intent is to make this industry competitive, it has to be a joint collaboration with the industry, because they also then use it in the right intent. And of course, the government as well. Today, it's not necessarily only export advantage, as localization or, like Nirmalji said, import substitution. There's also how do we get the growth? How do we get the investment? And yes, of course, scale does have its own advantages, its own merits. With scale, you're able to have more ability to invest and probably have a fast track growth.
Thank you, Deepak ji. Sunil ji, I just want to understand. So far, you have been exporting directly, uh, and do you plan to go via now another big player, because they can probably give you some advantage because they will get huge cashbacks under this scheme on incremental sales. So, which one, if you look at the business from business point of view, which one looks more lucrative to you?
It actually depends case to case. Absolutely, exports are more lucrative, and in the line that we are in, fortunately, we are the only one probably who does a lot of exports in the lawn garden market. So we get a good price, and it's a niche market. Uh, why not? You know, in our particular case, the prices are so competitive that probably the larger players will not like to get in there. The sizes are so small that probably the larger players would like to get in there. But to your question of whether we are open, yes, we are open. And that's what I said in the very beginning, that if the scheme at the end of the day is for the associate for automotive and for automotive component manufacturers, we have to make it a success and we have to make it jointly. If the government so wishes that it has to be rolled out to the large, 5% of the players, they will definitely take the smaller players along with them, because as Deepak said and Nirmalji said, that it's the ripple effect and it flows down. And we have to make ourselves Atmanirbhar, and scale obviously has a lot of advantages. And yes, the MSMEs would definitely like to piggyback onto the larger players in increasing their revenues, because at the end of the day, what are we wanting? We want from $57 billion in total revenue, or from $15 billion in export revenue, we want to go to 3 times that value in the next 5-6 years. And this scheme, the PLI scheme, is definitely the right step taken by the government to ensure that we get there, because we've been talking about this in the automotive mission plan. But I think by good canvassing and by good lobbying by the ACMA president and the past ACMA presidents, the government has finally heard us. So it's definitely the right step, and I think we will get there what we wish to be, and the MSMEs will benefit, and we'll work out something within our association as to how the larger players will take the smaller players along with them, so that everybody gets the benefit.
Do you think your aspiration will be compromised if you become too dependent on the larger players mostly?
No, you see, now that is a business case. There in Taiwan or in China, you'll see that a lot of tier twos and are dependent on the tier ones. But they've created that ecosystem, whereas in India we are now creating it when the world has reached a particular trade point, and therefore people who are doing their exports will continue to do their exports. But if I get another additional 10, 20, 30 crores in extra exports, well, why not? Absolutely welcome. So there is no such barrier, or there is no such problem. As I said, that we'd like to, the MSMEs should piggyback and onto the larger players, and it's been happening around the world, as it was pointed out by one of the previous speakers. So I don't see any problem in that.
Mindaji, what's your thought? Of course, it gives a lot of advantage when we talk about as a competitiveness on the global turf to us. But if we see at the micro level, the various stakeholders of the industry, how do you see this? What are the changes you probably expect, or what are the suggestions you would like to make to the government as they decide to roll out this scheme? And then we'll start taking questions from the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Naveed, once again. See, under the present PLI scheme, whatever we know from the media or from SORA or from other way, first of all, there is no draft policy available. That's my first request. The government should give us the draft policy to ACMA, so that we can discuss in ECMA as a steering body in ECMA, and then we can propose to the government. It should be win-win, as I said in the beginning. It should be the win-win scheme, so that government should achieve their objective of all those three objectives, what I said, and we can also achieve our benefit. And you were talking about MSME small one. This is an ecosystem. Sunilji also mentioned, and Deepak also mentioned. So there's no small and large nowadays. It is an ecosystem. If the bigger one get benefit, obviously it is going to pass the smaller one. So the first suggestion is the government should make us more interactive, more collaborative, as they have been doing in the many cases. And I am very, sometimes I get feared that, we understand the policy is going to be launched on 1st January. I don't know whether it is true or not. If it is launched like that without our consultation, I think that, both of us will not be able to reap the benefit, the actual benefit. That's my first thing. And second, some of the suggestion, like in the case of export, they say only 25% limit will be incentive will be given. So if I do 100 crores export today, tomorrow if I do 200 crore, I will be eligible for only 25% of the benefit. It will be considered only 125. So that one of the changes, if they can reconsider that. And whatever we hear as of now, the domestic industry is not going to get benefit, as Deepak said, the local manufacturer. Localization is, of course, Saurabhji presentation says it is Atmanirbhar Bharat, but as what we know from the media and all that is not, they are only concentrating on the export. But whereas in the other sector, it is localization and investment as well, other sector. So this is the second suggestion. And this is very, very important, because our major purpose should be to localize 1 lakh crore rupees import. This 1 lakh crore rupees import, as I mentioned before, it is going to increase in the future once the EV production increases, if those are not localized. I'm talking about other parts other than the battery. So this is going to be 2 lakhs crore. So is it our foreign exchange saving going to be there? And the R&D benefit, you mentioned that if the government can consider those, both the benefits were withdrawn. One was the MC and second was the tax benefit. So tax benefit might be difficult, but yes, if some incentive government can consider to localize parts, in place of import, some R&D benefit. So these are a couple of suggestions from my side. And most important is that it should be a collaborative policy.
Thank you. Deepak, your take on this.
No, I just wanted to supplement what Nirmalji just said. If I look at the bigger picture, the auto component industry had always been a net importer. So that means even with the scale of $57 billion in 1819, we were a net importer. So we were losing foreign exchange, right? And there's only two ways to actually become trade surplus, or basically become a foreign exchange earner. Either we will reduce our imports, or we will export much more. And I think what Nirmalji said is exactly this. And I'm happy to say that, in H1 performance of this COVID year, at least the auto component industry has become a net surplus, because the imports actually fell much more than exports. Imports degrew by 34%. And the exports only degrew by 25%. But this probably was a result of because the industry degrew by 34% in H1. However, we have to keep this momentum on by actually using both import substitution and also put our focus on exports. So I just wanted to prove that point so that we become a net surplus.
You're so excited about this policy, Deepak ji. I understand it is going to add a lot of value to the component manufacturing. Global level, we are still very minuscule, about 1.5% you mentioned. With this scheme being rolled out, what is your guidance for the industry?
See, I don't think only one scheme will help. It has to be a collaborative effort. It has to be a complete ecosystem effort. But I think as an aspiration, I think the intent is for the auto component industry, which has a huge potential for both domestic and export, to basically at least double its global value chain order from 1.5 to 3% in the next 4 to 5 years. I think that's an aspirational target which the industry has taken. Of course, we are in a COVID situation, but the whole world where we have seen is, I think, is looking at resourcing. And here, I think competitiveness will play the key from sourcing from India.
I would, if
Yeah.
permission,
Yes.
he was talking about competitiveness, Deepak, the competitiveness comes from one of the reasons is the economic of scale, the kind of volumes, they get benefit, our foreign, like China or Taiwan, they get benefit of economic of scale and they dump it to India. And sometimes we are not able to compete with them because they have a scale of manufacturing. So that is one reason. So as I was saying, the collaborative approach, suppose there is a 1 lakh crore rupees import today. Government is spending 57,000 crore. Government should agree with ECMA towards the roadmap that, okay, we give you 57,000 crore in 5 years. You reduce 1 lakh crore to, let's say, 40,000 crore or 30,000 crore over a period of time. So it should be linked so that they save money. We are, our economic of scale also get better. I'm just adding.
Yeah, Saurabh ji, I just want to understand one thing. We are talking about competitiveness. We still see that the problem exists in terms of manufacturing the high precision, high technology component. We are already struggling with electronics import not available. That's why we do not have enough electronics component to support the volume production in India in automobile space. Do you think the schemes like this will weed out such problems in future, and how is it going to help?
So, first of all, it's important to understand that auto as an industry is a $3 trillion industry globally. India, as of now, is only around $200 billion, both OE and component manufacturer put together. So if we see, there is a big gap, $3 trillion vis-a-vis $200 billion, which India is doing. So from a growth perspective, the market of the world is there for India. So whatever be the state of affairs of the policy, whether it is export oriented or is it giving the benefit to the domestic industry, I think, and we see a lot of team members from the industry being there, I think the focus should be how we grow ourselves in the world market and make India competitive in the world market overall. And of course, the government policies should be in sync with the same to support the industry around.
Suender ji, in terms of electric vehicle, how much of localization you think can be possible with the schemes like this? We talk about AC/DC converter and components like these. They are not easily localized in India right now. Do you think these schemes have the capacity or capability for the traditional auto component manufacturer to venture into EV components also strongly?
Nabil, it will certainly help. See, in EV space especially, we should understand that we are up against a giant called China, which is engulfing the whole world actually. And they are growing by every day. And with India specifically, they will always be having a keen eye not to allow us to go up. I fear that with the PLI scheme there, they will start undercutting the prices also. So we have to be very careful when we deal with China, and we have aspirations of EV being EV hub of the world. Then we have to take such like steps in a much bigger way and much comprehensive and integrated way. So I believe following batteries, the other component industry can also become big, because EV is a big dream for India. What is like, if you are talking of 5 million vehicles, it's big enough on the plate for many players to become big there. It's only a question of having the faith and trust in that, and government taking care very, very tactfully. For example, we have so much on our hand of tariffs that can be done once you are self-sufficient here. In fact, this is a route to avoid WTO eyes also over here, this PLI scheme. So there are steps being taken. All I believe is we are having a China government which is so agile, so nimble-footed. They take actions overnight, and we have to match that. We have matched the speed, agility to be able to counter them and be really self-sufficient, especially in the EV space, and take them head on. And I believe it can be done.
Thank you so much, Suender ji. I'll take the question from the audience. I'll request all the audience to pose their question with the name of the panel member they want answer from. That will make it easy. Yes, Sunil ji, your final.
I just like to use your forum to stress here, that MSMEs are growing, and with the new definition, there is a lot of scope for MSMEs to grow. There is a fund of funds scheme that has been announced by the government recently. I think it will come into play in the next few months, and that is another step for the MSMEs to grow, 3 times, because they want to take up equity of something like 15 crores in your companies, and that will enable MSMEs to themselves cater to the larger players to kind of help in growing in meshing with the PLI scheme. So this is fund of fund scheme is a very big step that the government proposes to take, and I wish that they would do it very fast.
Thank you, Sunilji. So I'll take the first question from the audience because we have a few minutes only left. So I'll try to take as many questions as possible from the audience. This is the first question from Maushmi Mohanty. She wants to know, how will the PLI scheme help small and medium size enterprise in the auto sector? What are the direct benefit this scheme has? Deepak ji, if you want to take this up.
See, I think, as I said, I mean, so the scheme, as is what we understand, would qualify to probably a few players and not all players. However, understand the automotive fabric itself. Our OEMs are a lot larger than us, and they have held tier ones and helped us grow. And as they scaled up to this levels of Indian market, I mean, say obviously the tier ones and tier twos and tier threes, so everyone's grown. So obviously, if this kind of scheme would be able to fast track the tier ones to grow faster and make more competitive, I'm sure all the other players in the ecosystem will also help. So it will not have a direct, but it'll have a trickle down indirect benefit to all.
So next question, we have been talking about job creation. Generally, job creation comes from the new corporation, new companies being set up, because we already see the established one have, a lot of idle capacity. So does this scheme anyhow helps the new companies to set up in India? Is there some advantage to that? Saurabh or anybody who wants to answer this? Yes, Saurabh, you want to take this? Yeah, Nirmal sir.
No, it's okay. Sorry, Saurabh, you want to answer, please?
No, go ahead, Nirmal sir. So I will like to hear it from the industry more.
Oh, no. I think first of all, you said that Nabil, there is enough excess capacity. Yes, we do have an excess capacity sometime, but going forward, our production is also going to increase. As we always say that we are very optimistic, at least plus minus 10% we need to grow every year. So answer to this specific question, yes, there will be a lot of opportunity. Many players, foreign players may come to India, will come to India, and we will also expand our capacity for the job creation. So that is the basic purpose. We are requesting government that one of the objectives of the government is to job creation, and we will support as an ecosystem, tier one, tier MSME, tier one, and OEM will expand the capacity and create the jobs.
The next question comes from Jitendra. He wants to understand if this scheme will be extended to lubricants player also. Saurabh ji.
No idea. The scheme's draft is still not out. I don't think so that lubricants qualify as an auto component per se. So lubricants are not at all auto component. Those are more of oil related stuff. So I don't think that should be covered in this scheme. But let's see how the scheme pans out to be.
Even I think tire is not part of this scheme, if I'm not wrong. Tire manufacturer.
No idea. As I said, the scheme's draft is not out. Even I'm hearing that off-road is also out. Means you don't know what will be there or what will not be there. The brief, what they say is auto and auto component allocation as 57,000 crores.
Next question comes from Maulik Jasani. In eligibility criteria, whether all three criteria needs to be met or one of the criteria out of the revenue, fixed asset, investment, or exports can qualify manufacturer to avail the PLI scheme benefits. I think all three criteria, if I'm not wrong, right? Sort of, you want to answer this or add something to this?
Whatever I read from the media, all three have to be met. Means I will go by the Nabil, your article only of 17th or 18th December, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, that's what information I also got from the sources. But let's see if there is some change comes out after it is given the actual shape. Okay, it's not still ready. I will again say that it's still not out. It's not the final, but this is what so far has been discussed. Based on that, we have the article and we have today's discussion also. So next question from Salav Surdhana War. How do you see a hunt for researchers, designers, project planners, commercial experience to align with government to the announcement of PLI scheme? Since any common citizen may have some idea of EV battery. So basically, is there some advantage to the innovators or somebody who can come up with an idea in this space? Is there something for them? I don't think there is something, but anyone can contribute to that.
Well, indirectly, I think it is because there's an export focus to the scheme, which means international competitiveness, which means good quality standards. And OEMs would certainly depend on a lot of R&D, a lot of quality criteria. And there is a lot of opportunity for the small guys to join in this race to be able to give export-worthy competitive products.
This is a specific question for Mr. Deepak Jain. Do you recommend government to further change the criteria, especially in terms of annual turnover, so that a more number of companies can participate in this, scheme?
Bill, as I said before, I think we have to match the government intent with the industry intent. And when we were deliberating, I think there were certain boundaries which we had been given across. And obviously, it was for the idea to fast track players. But in the event, if the players would be fast tracked, it would basically encourage all this. Just 2 points I would like to make on the previous questions. One, I think within ACMA, we did a survey. And it's very heartening to know that 50% of the ACMA executive committee leadership thought that we would actually resume investments, which would be prior to, pre-COVID level investments would be resumed in the next financial year going forward. So I think there's a sense of optimism. And whenever you basically look at investments, that means you want to basically look at growth. And growth could be also, as you said, in engineering resources, R&D, to develop capabilities of the industry. So I just wanted to park that point across so that there's not necessarily linked to a PLI or one scheme. Of course, I think we would really, as I said, welcome this scheme and welcome this move by the government. And I know very much that from NITI Aayog to basically Ministry of Commerce to MORTH and to our parent DHI were very, very extensively involved in making it. And of course, then Ministry of Finance allocating a 40-45% of the total allocation on 10 sectors. So I think that was very, very encouraging for the sector, and which itself will give us an optimistic point to actually invest in the future of the industry.
Thank you, Deepak. Next question for Mr. Minda. Promoting the champions, won't it lead to monopoly of the big ones? This is another question that comes.
No, it is not. I would say not. Again, I would say it is a win-win for the government. What is the government desire? What is the government need? And what can be done? And it is an ecosystem. It is not only we cannot do, like OEM cannot manufacture all parts and start with vehicle manufacture. We cannot all manufacture all our parts. We have to develop on our tier 2, tier 3. So it is an MSME, it is an ecosystem. If the government target of localization, reducing import or export target, if it can be met by top players, and I think it is not only on this segment, in auto segment, it is PLI scheme in all segments. Saurabh would, I think, can put better. It is always in all segment. It is for the some few, top few. Am I right, Saurabh?
Correct, Mindaji. I think so far the schemes have been for the top few. That is how has been the overall focus to make it big.
Another question, I'll take only few questions now. Another question from Prem Kumar. Sir, if the scheme is helping big players and their requirement will increase towards their suppliers, as Saurabh said, at least the tier 2 and tier 3 will get the revenue. So do you think the tier 2 and tier 3 players will have that much of potential to expand their capacity to meet for the requirement from tier 1 players immediately or something? So I think Sunil and probably Deepak ji both can answer this question.
Sunilji, would you like to go first? Okay, you're on mute. So
Okay. Deepak,
I'll just say.
oh,
See, I think, Barba, every time a question is coming that will it be only advantages to one, will it not be advantages to other? Let me tell you the fabric of the auto industry. And it is a global phenomenon. This is an industry where this is a lot of cross learning is happening. Within ACMA, we have competition within members, but we are also very, very not just friendly, but collaborative with each other because, as I said, this whole industry is so intertwined that one falls, one becomes weak. Actually, the whole chain becomes weak. And in the same spirit, I would say the OEM and the auto ancillary, the trust is every day reinstated by basically ensuring that if one grows, everyone else grows. So this is the fabric of this ecosystem. And again, I want to say that I think we should look at the scheme with the right intent and then say that if it is going to be meritorious for India to grow, to capture more global value chain in the world order, it would be definitely advantageous to the whole ecosystem.
the next
I
question.
just like to add to that, Nabil. Yes, I second that. And as I said earlier, that the point is that we have to go to that automotive mission plan. That number I forget it's about 150 or 200 billion dollars. And this PLI scheme is one of the schemes that will get us there for sure. You know, we have to all work together, the small and the large companies, to get there.
So next question is from Jash Luhana. Is this fair that for the sake of competing with China, Japan, and other countries, focus should be on big giants rather than boosting small scale and entrepreneurs and manufacturers? Who will take this question? Similar kind of questions coming in.
I'll just give you a different analogy. How did China, Japan, Korea became so big? Let's understand their fabric. There were a few basically players which were actually given a full targeted collaboration and cooperation by the government. Of course, the democratic and obviously a different kind of political environment depends on different. So China is different, Korea is different, Japan is different. But beneath that, the basis was same. And hence the intent was that now the Samsungs of the world, or basically the Koreans especially, use that to very effective advantage, or even China. So hence I think the intent is, and this is, as I said, just a start. This is a very unique way where the government of India is trying to promote basically a fast track environment where we do. I think more important now would be that even if the scheme is launched, we have a collaborative model between the government and the industry. So if it is fine-tuned, because what I've seen, the COVID times, it's such a dynamic environment. The global competitiveness has become so dynamic. So I think we'll keep on have to fine-tune it for the betterment of the nation's objective of making Atmanirbhar Bharat.
So next question from Joab Biswas. With this scheme, where do you think the bulk of the investment would go towards capex or R&D by the big players? Yes, Mindaji, if you can answer this.
I would say most of them, because it is localization, it will go towards the capex. So capex, of course, for doing the capex and for doing the localization, we definitely need to do R&D, as I said before, but most of it will go towards the capex.
So we still have very less R&D spent in India.
Again, I would like to use this forum that all the capex as of today, whether it is casting machine, molding machine, tool manufacturing machines, are being imported. So we have huge possibility, of localizing all those machines. I mean, everyone, if you look at the data, we are not talking about 1 lakh crore rupees import of auto component in the sector, but if you look at the capex import in the country, it will be huge numbers. I think, industry can give a huge number, CIN can get. So in auto sector, we import a huge. So there will be very, very good opportunity if we can do some proof of concept for the capex equipments. It will be very good going forward.
Thank you so much. I'll take one last question. This is from Himanshu Vora. With import substitution as the prime reason for PLI, how EV sector is working on capacity building front? What is this sector doing on this front as an ecosystem? So Hinderji, I would like to hear this from you.
Well, Nabil, a lot is happening in EV sector in the last 1 or 2 years, especially from the government side, policy intervention at central and state level. So OEMs particularly and component industry is getting a lot of trust behind this sector now. And we seem to have bottomed out of the lowest point that we were in. And any extrapolation and any forecast is all saying exponential growths, like big growths going forward. And so many of us are aligning themselves. Like my turnover surely would be more than 1,000 crore 2 years from now, and investments will be upwards of 600 crores, and so many others. So I believe that for EV particularly, such like stimuli, coupled with so many other things that have already happened, as a basket, are a sure short way to create an EV ecosystem. And OEMs which were jittery before, like 2-3 years back, we were all very jittery, whether we are in the right business, whether we are too soon in this, that's far behind now. There are a lot more tailwinds than headwinds now. And perhaps the future for all of us sitting here is EV, EV, EV.
Thank you so much, Swendarji. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today's panel discussion. It was certainly a very good discussion that has broken a lot of myths and given the fair idea how will the Indian component industry chug along with these policies that are expected to come out. At the end, I would like to convey once again, this is only based on the information available from the sources and what so far the government or its think tank have thought of, but we do not know when the actual policy is rolled out. It could be slightly different from what we discussed today, but a lot of what we have discussed are going to be part of the actual policy framework that I can probably suggest safely. Thank you so much once again for joining ETAuto live panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.